Reality check with Craig Price.
Oh, right. Sorry.
I'm an idiot.
4 minutes in and I'm already wrong.
I'm like a monkey. Hello, look at me. Craig, shut up.
Hey, I need you guys to do these things.
You're like a beautiful mind. I'm more like Forrest Gump. So it's...
Welcome to another Reality Check with Craig Price. On the show today, Kirstin Carey with Nourish Restaurant. She's going to be on the show to talk about living a gluten-free lifestyle. And just so you know, my voice is slowly improving. I'm still kind of be disappointed that I'll have the low voice that I'm carrying right now will no longer be with me as the nasal and the whine slowly seep back to normalcy. But I'm going to abuse and use the deep voice as best I can in the radio. A little bit of gravelly, get the sexiness to it back. But it's the only time that anybody said, "Oh, last week I heard your podcast. Your voice was so sexy." It was disgusting. I was rough and gravelly, and of course I appreciate you listening through that to get to the great interview with Vinny. But this week, Kirstin Carey talking gluten-free, and she's got a restaurant, Nourish, but she's also going to be hosting the Gluten-Free Expo and Conference, which is going to be this Saturday, August 13th in Scottsdale, Arizona. You can go to her website, nourish123.com, and sign up and register for the conference. But you can also just go there to get more information about gluten-free living, learn more about her wonderful restaurant, Nourish. And if you're ever in the Scottsdale, Phoenix area, head on over and enjoy a gluten-free vegan experience. It's actually a really great restaurant. I've had samples. I haven't had a chance to actually eat at the restaurant. But everything I've heard about it and the things that she has made for me, I've tasted wonderful. So I'm glad she's on the show because I know people who suffer from allergies, especially gluten-free allergies. It can be really debilitating for a lot of people. It can cause a lot of problems in one's life, and so I want to make sure that you understand that this is not just a one-time thing. This is not just a fad. This is not something that people are highlighting now and then 3 months from now or 2 years from now it's going to go away in the background. I think this gluten-free issue is going to cause more and more of a problem. I think more people are going to be affected by glutens and react negatively towards glutens. So I think it's important that we get this information out here. And also that there's places where you can go to eat. That's the key thing. It's not that there are allergies out there, but there's also very few resources and places for people to go to eat. And Kirsten has started one just on the sheer fact that she needed a place in Scottsdale to go on a regular basis. So without any further ado, let me give you Kirstin Carey. You and David and Robert all went to lunch.
Yeah, it was good.
That's good. What'd you get?
And we had a newbie.
Who was the newbie?
VIP. I can't think of her name off the top of my head.
Like I said, don't be afraid to get right up on it.
Can't think of her name off the top of my head, but
okay.
she was good. I had salmon.
Salmon?
Mm-hmm.
Did they do a good job here?
Yeah, well, actually, they're learning the gluten-free thing, which is funny because they asked me to. The conference chair is having so much trouble dealing with some of the issues that I know that the NSA has been planning for the gluten-free and those who have food allergy issues. But Kara Tracy, who's the meeting planner for NSA, is gluten-free now. So she, I think, is really seeing with wide eyes how difficult it is to eat this way. And the hotel's been struggling a little bit. So they asked her who she would recommend for, dealing with that. And it's so funny because obviously that's what I do. So I've already talked to the hotel here about how they can go be more efficient and successful at serving food for conventions for a large group of people when you have this many food allergies or restrictions or issues.
Because some people are doing it because of the gluten-free, because of the allergy issue. Mm-hmm. But then some people are just doing it because, and I don't know if this is true, they're doing it because it's a healthier way of life. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily the actual reality of the situation, but it's certainly the perception that if you go gluten-free, you're going to be better off.
Well, let me take that in two parts. The first part is that essentially no one processes wheat or corn. So, I mean, it's kind of why you kind of borrow the food and you see it the next day looking pretty much the same as it did when it went in.
I'm glad we had this conversation after lunch.
We don't essentially process the food. And there's really, and I'm sure there's going to be nutritionists who are going to argue with me on this one, but it's not worth the food to me. So we're not processing it. So for the fact that you would not be eating wheat or gluten, that would be the healthier choice, my version. The challenge and the reason I'm doing this conference, the Gluten-Free Expo and Conference that we'll talk about later, the reason I'm doing it is because I think a lot of people don't know enough information to know if you're going to go gluten-free, how do you do it the healthiest possible way? Just because it's gluten-free doesn't mean it's better for you or it's healthy. So that's the part that I think people are missing on the gluten-free thing.
And for those who don't know, I'm here with Kirstin Carey, gluten-free aficionado, and kind of forced by nature.
Yes. Forced into, this is not, I love food. I'm from Philly originally. I mean, cheesesteaks were a way of life. I mean, soft pretzels, everything that was glutinous we're all in. Bread is awesome in Philadelphia.
Bread's pretty good everywhere.
Yeah, true.
No,
true.
I mean, I know you got a lot of Philly pride going. I
True.
can feel it. But there's good bread everywhere.
All right, fine. Anyway.
And maybe it's because the Amish are nearby.
Yeah, well, the Amish are nearby, and we also have Amoroso rolls, which you can only get in the Philadelphia, New Jersey area. But they were the best. And hoagies, and again, so when I found out that I was allergic to wheat, and then further found out that I was a celiac, which means I can't have gluten. And gluten, for those of you who don't really know what it is, it's wheat, barley, rye. It's the proteins in those items. So essentially anything that looks like bread is going to be glutinous.
But that's the tasty stuff.
But
That's
again,
that's
it's
tough.
There's arguments to why we really love it, but for the most part, it's damaging most people. It's just to what degree it's happening. Some of us react much more worse. I'm a speaker. Much worse.
No. Today you're a restaurateur.
Today I'm a restaurateur.
Yeah, and a conference planner. You're not
yes.
You don't have to worry about the speaking part.
Oh, good. So
you
I
can
can
mumble
just-
through this whole interview. Don't worry about it. That's no pressure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So there is this illusion for many people, if they just go gluten-free, they'll be healthier. But I think they have to understand why, and then what other things they're using in the gluten-free products to know, is that thing actually any better for me, or should I just choose something else, or just know what else is in my food?
Now, I became aware of a celiac, which is a severe allergy to gluten, through a friend of my wife's.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people really understand the reactions that it can cause. It's not just break out in hives or something like that. This poor lady, very sweet girl lady, was getting miscarriages because of her gluten allergy, the Celiac Foundation. Yep. And in fact, we did a run and we sponsored it. It was great. They do a lot of great stuff, but it's hard to find that food. So, what was your situation?
Well, I mean, let me talk about.
Here, eat this roll while we talk and see what happens.
For me, as a celiac, again, people think allergy. They think I eat this thing, I get sick instantly. Like they think of like a shellfish allergy, anaphylactic.
Or peanut allergy.
Yeah, it's an anaphylactic response. There's basically two different responses you're going to have when you have an allergy to food. You're either going to have an instant anaphylactic response, or you're going to have a slow delay response. The slow delayed response to me is the hardest one to find, because it may happen over the course of a couple days. It doesn't happen instantaneously.
So you eat a hoagie on Friday and you don't really see any effects until Sunday, and by then you've eaten let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different meals.
Right. So you don't.
I'm sorry,
know.
I'm eating 6 because I'm a little piggish. But
okay. But so when people think allergy, they think, oh, I blow up, which is the anaphylactic response, and many people have those as well. The celiac response, or the slow delayed response, is usually more gastrointestinal. So you'll get bloated, and like that night you'll literally look like you're pregnant.
Yeah,
I mean, it's pretty quick.
She would do that. She's tiny.
Yep.
And you're tiny.
Yep.
I mean, how are you? 5'1"?
Yeah, 5'2".
Yeah, and she was shorter. She was like 5'1", and they would go out to eat, and literally she would
start to bloat
by an hour when she got back.
It's amazing. So I mean, that's one of the major signs I know that
I won't mention her name because now we've talked about bloating and all this horrible stuff.
But so many people suffer with that. I mean, a lot of people have been diagnosed with IBS or Crohn's or a lot of other digestional issues. Colitis. It's a lot of times either started by celiac or gluten intolerance, or it just is a gluten intolerance and they've been misdiagnosed. So you'll see that. You'll see gas. I mean, essentially, if your body's talking to you, if it's making noises.
Literally talking to you,
it's trying to tell you, hey, what you've done to me is not making me happy.
So if I eat something and then like 3 minutes later.
Yeah, your stomach is making noises. You're
that's
burping.
Bad news.
There's gas. Any of that stuff. Your body's telling you don't do this, which is why I get really frustrated when I see commercials for Prevacid or any of those things. Like, keep eating it. Just take this pill. Your body is actually being damaged when it's doing that because there's something going wrong.
So what was happening to you in particular?
I was having stomach issues. I was bloating. I was suddenly gaining weight when I was a tinier person, and all of a sudden I'm gaining weight, and I never had issues with my weight before. Other digestive problems, things weren't necessarily flowing through my body as the way it should on a more daily basis. Things like that. And I felt puffy all the time. I also had migraine headaches. I was actually losing hair, and I didn't know that until after I'd come back. You can actually see on me now, I've got like bangs. It's pretty much what has grown back over the years, but I didn't notice it because it was
Maybe that's what's happening to me.
slow thing.
Maybe that's what Robert Bradford has. He's got an allergy.
That's all it is. Skin conditions. I mean, all of a sudden I had adult acne, but other like dry skin patches and things that you know, doctor just gives you more things for, but you're like, this isn't right. I mean, there's something wrong. So once I finally found out there was an allergy to wheat, and then I further found out that I was a celiac, and I got myself off of that, it was amazing how many things changed. I lost weight. I got back to a healthy size for myself. And the bloating stopped. Now that still happens to me every now and then when something has gotten into my food that I didn't know was in there.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is it's not only is it the time when you say you eat something on Friday and then you don't get any reaction until Sunday, and by that time you've had 5, or in my case 6 meals.
Right.
But it's just difficult to figure out what it is, because no one just eats. I'm going to eat a bowl of flour. I'm going to eat a thing of one type. Everything's mushed together, so it's so hard to figure out what that one thing is.
Right. Well, I mean, some of the other symptoms that people are pretty familiar with: thyroid disorder, hypo or hyper, osteoporosis. Because when you have celiac or you have a gluten disorder and you're still eating it, it rips open your stomach linings essentially, and your stomach is supposed to be weaved together very tightly. But what it does is it starts to rip it open, so holes essentially appear, and
like an ulcer.
Yeah, they call it leaky gut.
Is that the technical term?
Yeah, actually, it is.
Is that on the medical?
Yes.
Is that Latin?
That's what they'll tell you. It's a leaky gut. But then food starts sliding through those spaces in your stomach and gets into your bloodstream, and your bloodstream's like, hey, not supposed to see food here, so this must be toxic. And then it starts really shutting down. So you can start developing other food allergies on top of it if you're not healing your gut properly and you're continuing to eat these things. So that's where the big issues come from. But osteoporosis is a big one, and some other inefficiency conditions, because you stop being able to absorb food and nutrients properly. So though you're eating it, nothing's getting through, and you're just passing it through your system before your body gets it.
So how are you gaining the weight then?
Right. Well, I was.
You were just taking the calories.
At the time, I was gaining the weight because I was literally swelling. I mean, it was like I was getting puffy. It was
okay.
So,
you were just absorbing a lot of water. It was just causing a break.
And you hold on to that, and again, things don't move through your system, so it starts to just hang out where it's not supposed to, and
like a union strike. I'm thinking in Philly, like no one's picking up the garbage.
Right? Exactly.
It's like a union strike.
Nobody's picking up the garbage, and if the garbage hangs out in your colon for too long, you can reabsorb the bad things, the toxins that your body's trying to push through back into your system, especially estrogen, which really messes with women. So, I mean, they're the things. So essentially, if food isn't moving through your system, and from 18 to 24 hours is the kind of good window. If food isn't moving through your system within 18 to 24 hours, that means either if it's too soon, you're not absorbing anything because it's passing through too fast. And if it's 24, then you're reabsorbing bad toxins in your colon and causing yourself all sorts of other bad things. Okay. Yeah, so there's some detail.
Yeah, that's fine. You got to put it out there.
Yeah, well, but it's a good red flag.
I had Anastasia on earlier, and she was talking about oral sex, so we can talk about impacted colons.
Yeah, we won't be getting to the oral sex part here, but
really, because hopefully that'll be some kind of allergy.
I'll figure it out.
Instead of what is they call an EpiPen?
An EpiPen, yeah.
You take a PP pen.
Yep. There you go.
So, anyways, we'll move off of that.
Yes, please.
But so you had these reactions, and you realized it wasn't just.
It wasn't just
something that was just like one-time thing. It was over a period of time. It was causing problems.
Yeah, and again, my family's reaction was like, oh, well, we're all like that, and that's hereditary. And I'm like, yeah, because we all eat the same thing.
Sure.
Yeah, and the Irish are the number one. Ireland's the number one country for celiac disease. Italy's number 2.
Oh, great. That's probably what I have then.
It's usually a good red flag. But again, gluten's one of those things that most people have a problem with. They just have it at varying degrees.
Right, because some people just have the headaches.
Yep.
And maybe some dry skin patches, and then other people have the massive bloating and miscarriages and horrible reactions. And I mean, don't you have to carry something in case you have a anaphylactic situation?
Well, I carry an EpiPen actually because I'm believe it or not, I'm allergic to Tylenol and ibuprofen, so that's why I carry my EpiPen.
Man, that's a tough.
And
allergy.
it's an instantaneous reaction. It's I'm can't breathe, eyes blown out, lips split. It's hot. But with the wheat and everything else, I just get every other symptom. The stomach, it's terrible, and then I start to bloat, and I feel like hell, and I get migraines, and it's not fun.
You go to the doctors, and how do they isolate Is there
which one it
is there a really easy test?
Yeah.
Or is it?
Well, I mean, there's the stereotypical scratch test that most people are familiar with.
Is that the one where they have like
where they poke your
they have a
inside
chart
your arms?
and
Yeah.
they hit and they poke you with different
Yep.
things?
And it's awful. That was my first one that I did, and I hated it because I don't like people sticking me with stuff. What I ended up doing from there, because again, my allergist was just kind of like, well, it looks like you have an allergy to wheat, so just kind of stop eating it. And if you don't feel better in a couple weeks, then we'll come back and we'll do some other stuff. But if you do feel better, just, whatever, eat it sometimes if you want. I mean, she was like, it was no big deal. And so I didn't really take it as seriously as I probably should have when I first got it, but it wasn't getting better. So I really started learning what food wheat was in. I mean, like soy sauce, for example, has wheat in it. Essentially anything that looks like bread. But I mean, these are the weird things you don't know. Like most restaurants will get their French fries pre-cut and frozen from their manufacturer. They're usually laced with gluten and corn solution because it preserves them.
Okay.
For being frozen, and then it helps them crisp up faster when they're frying them. So you wouldn't normally think, oh, sweet potato fries, they're going to have gluten on them? Yeah, they are. Scrambled eggs at a lot of hotels and restaurants, they will put...
Well, that's most of them are from powder.
Well, no, actually, the issue is they use pancake batter a lot of times in the scrambled eggs to make them fluffier.
Oh.
And go further.
I remember that.
Yeah, so, I mean, these are things that you think you're safe with. A lot of times they'll fry bacon in the fryers, which they're already frying other things that have...
Yeah, that's recycled grease.
Yes.
Often whatever was in there before.
Right.
Because sometimes you'll get a piece of bacon and it'll taste like bacon and I don't. It's like an improv.
Yep.
It's bacon and.
Yep.
It just kind of tastes kind of just off a little bit.
Yep, and that's why, because they're doing this. So these are some of the hidden things that they're doing in the kitchen that you don't even realize, and you're buying food that you think is safe, but they're using wheat in so many different ways, and so it gets difficult and it gets a little scary actually when you eat out because you think you're okay, you ask the right questions, they're not trained as well, and they tell you the wrong things, unfortunately, and then you get sick. It stinks.
So how do you when you're grocery shopping, how diligent do you have to be? I mean, I'm assuming you have to read every label, but even then you probably have to do a little bit more research because some things aren't on the label.
Right. Now, wheat has to be on the label because it is one of the top 8 allergens. Of the 8 allergens that are out there, all 8 of them have to be listed on the label. That being said, there's a whole bunch of other allergens. For example, I'm allergic to corn, which we're finding a lot more celiacs and people have issues with corn because it's in everything. For example, vitamin C tablets, unless it otherwise specifies, it's made from corn.
Wow.
So when it says added vitamin C or citric acid, that's corn. So they put corn in...
Well, they put it in everything. I just spoke at a food processors association meeting, and you would pretty much, if you eat it, corn is in it somehow.
Yeah.
And it's not, they use it as a sweetener.
Yep.
They use it as coatings. They use
Yep.
it as preservatives.
Yep.
I mean, they use it in so many things that you wouldn't assume. They use it for coloring.
Yeah, they use it for pretty much whenever it says natural flavors, that's essentially corn and or MSG. So these are the things that are in our food, but because they're not one of the top 8 allergens, the government doesn't force them to put that word corn on the label. So this is where it becomes scary for people with food allergies. And just in general, we don't really know what's in our food. And that's where I get afraid. Because I prefer to know. But I read labels like an insane person.
Well, I'm a more of a don't ask, don't tell kind of person. Especially at a what we call ethnic food. Anything that's I don't know about, Chinese,
Yep.
Ethiopian. I go just if I don't like it, I won't eat it. But don't tell me what's in it because some of the ingredients that are healthy and they won't cause a food allergy just sound gross, anyways. So but you've got to be diligent, and it's kind of difficult because, like I said, sometimes they don't even know themselves what's actually in it because they're getting it from a third party.
Right.
So are you constantly like getting updates, like looking online to figure out what's going on, and
I'm
where
on
do you
top
go?
of it all the time. At Continue, it's interesting. I've found really awesome stuff that's out there just by people who have the food allergies and themselves are watching. So there's a lot of us who post things constantly, and I just found out this. I just found out this. I'm in a couple of support groups for people with celiac and that kind of thing, and we're constantly posting to each other about other things that we found out that are new. But I'm pushing back on the manufacturers and the restaurants to know what's in your food. I'm not going to give you a really hard time about I can't have more things on your menu. I just want to know what's in the food.
Yeah, you're not criticizing their choices. You're just criticizing the education of what's inside.
Yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, every restaurant should know what's in their food. And I was at a really big restaurant in Atlantic City not too long ago, and it's a well-known restaurant. And I said to them, I'd like to have this dressing, and I have an allergy to eggs. And do you know if there's any eggs in the salad dressing? And they left for a little while, and the guy came back and he says, we don't know because the chef who makes that dressing isn't here. And I'm like, you don't have a recipe book, you don't know what's in your food. And they said no, because that chef isn't here. And unfortunately,
So if they run out, they have to wait until the chef shows up.
yeah, but unfortunately that means that they don't know what's in their food at all unless that's particular chef. Now, if that chef decides to quit or take off, I guess they have to take that thing off the menu or come up with a new recipe. But that is actually how the majority of restaurants actually work, which is pretty frightening. In my restaurant, Nourish, we have a recipe book that every one of my staff knows where it is. At any given time, my front of house or back of house can come up, grab this thing, bring it out to a customer, and we can go through every single recipe, and we don't change things on the fly. We use specific vendors for a reason. We push back on our vendors constantly. And if it just says spices or natural flavors, we make them outline every single thing that's on there, or we don't buy from them.
Well, let's get into the restaurant because, you finally you moved to Arizona.
Yep.
And obviously you got sick of going to places and not knowing what's in the food and
Yeah.
probably having massive reactions that you don't really like.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was right when I started finding out about the gluten-free thing. And I found it really hard to go out. And there was only a couple places that claimed that they had gluten-free restaurant menus, but it was difficult even then. And my husband at the time was, and still is actually, he's vegan. He eats vegan, which is a whole nother load of restrictions when you eat.
He's still vegan. No, he's not your husband
He's
anymore.
not my husband.
Because that was a weird sentence.
I know.
My husband at the time, he still is.
He was my husband at the time.
But he's vegan then and now.
Yes, he's still vegan. But when we were eating out, I thought it was really interesting because we would get treated very differently. When I said I have a food allergy, at least they took me seriously and tried to find something out. But when he said, well, I'm vegan and I don't eat anything with dairy or with a face or with eggs.
With a face.
Yeah, with a face. It was interesting. The reaction was kind of like, well, there's only a little bit of cheese in it. I'm like, that's like being a little bit pregnant. You either are or you're not.
Well, that's like being a little bit of a cannibal.
Yeah, you're like a little bit. But their version of it was he was choosing to do that, so therefore he was being a pain in the neck. Can he just get over it? And me, at least, I had the allergy, so I had to do it.
Yeah, they're legally obligated if you die in their restaurants because of something.
So it was funny, just seeing the reactions. But I thought that's not really fair. Like, so he chooses to eat that way. You shouldn't treat him any different. But again, finding places he and I could both eat was also difficult. And if I went to any of the vegan restaurants with him, I always kind of felt out of place because I'm such the carnivore. And it was like it was a religion sometimes when I'd go into very specific restaurants.
Yeah, I spoke to another group of food. It was all meat related. And I've noticed, because I was doing research, but I also know a lot of vegans. And they're different than vegetarians. But the vegans it just does seem like a culture. And quite frankly, they seem a little smug.
Yeah, and some of them can be, and
yeah,
because it's more of a religious kind of.
Not all of them, but I mean, the ones I've met, you go, oh, I'm a vegan, and then they go about how much better they are, and you want to smack them.
Some of my best friends are vegans. But that being said,
Jared.
What I thought at the time still was there should be a place that we can all go and not feel like a freak at the table. Because I would feel like a freak at the table when I was at the vegan restaurants with him. He felt out of place, when we were at places that were like steakhouses. But I'm like, why can't there be options for all of us? And all you really need to do is understand what's in your food. So what we chose to do with the restaurant is we went gluten-free, so the whole restaurant's gluten-free. And then the second tier down, we watched to try to see if we can make food as vegan as possible. So I have 54 items on my menu. Half of them are vegan-friendly. They're all gluten-free friendly. And then we've got varying things. Like I've got burgers on my menu, so I'm all in with the carnivore thing and chicken and all that. But we do it in a way that doesn't make people who choose to eat one way feel out of place. So you don't have to identify yourself at the freak of the table. You just eat the way you eat. And every single solitary thing on my menu is color coded.
Oh, the menu I saw was amazing.
It's pretty cool.
And it's and also your staff.
My staff is good.
Ask questions.
Yeah, the very first question out of my staff's mouth when they see you is, are there any food allergies or restrictions that we need to know about to make sure that you're having the best experience possible? And they feel comfortable saying, yeah, you know what, I have a gluten allergy, or I have this, I'm vegan, I want this, how can I get through this? And then they open the menu, and it's so obvious if you're vegan which items are available to you, if you're gluten-free, if you're, we identify for eggs, nuts, gluten, corn, dairy, vegan, and vegetarian are the 7 things that we watch out for. So you can know pretty much instantly what you can and cannot have without having to go through the whole menu. And is it this in there or is this in there? It's very obvious. And that actually was one of the selfish reasons I did that was for business purposes to streamline the process so that the staff isn't standing with you
45
for 15
minutes.
Yeah, trying to figure something
holding
out.
your hand through each menu. Does
Right.
this have this in it? I would love to have this. It looks tasty,
can I
but
have
what's
this,
in
but what
this?
is- Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel bad myself when I'm at
It's in
restaurants. and I have to
Scottsdale,
ask.
so I had to do the old
It is
time
yes,
person
well,
voice.
Yes,
Sorry.
or the hipster that's clubbing. But
They sound like old Jewish people? I've never met a hipster clothing, so it's like,
No.
I want to listen to we got Mobius and we got all kinds of good stuff at the rave. Doesn't they don't do that? Okay,
No, they're not going to the raves, but
I don't know anything about hipsters except they wear the hats all the time.
the hats. Yeah, the hats.
Do they have a lot of hipsters in Scottsdale?
They have people who like to club. Go to the clubs.
What does that mean?
Yeah, the clubbing kids,
They
like
just
I feel very old when I'm near them. Yes.
I feel old around all kids, but I can't even tell. Now I'm getting to the age I can't even tell what age kids are anymore.
I know.
I mean, I look at a person and I go, that person's young. What are they like? 22, 23? She's 16. What?
Yeah, you're like, what? Yeah, no.
I used to be able to bam.
Yeah, but I think they look older now.
Well, yeah,
I didn't look like that
They
when I
kind
was
of
16.
tarted up a little bit,
Yeah.
as they say.
Anyway.
So, it's in Scottsdale, and
In Scottsdale.
you opened up the restaurant in a down economy. I want people to know
Yep.
that you did not open it at the height,
No.
8 years ago when, everybody was flush with cash.
May 2010. And we opened it in May, which is going into the worst time of the year for Arizona for restaurants because everybody leaves town because it's so hot. But to me, as a business owner of other businesses as well, but that's the best time to do something when it's the hardest because you get all the details right. And if you can't make it in a hard economy, you're going to be screwing up a lot in a good economy because you don't really realize what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong.
Absolutely.
So when we start to slide back, because the economy is going to continue to change.
That's
you
negative
can really
thinking
screw
working
up.
for you. I like that.
Yeah. It's backwards, but you get things really tight. You know who your good
forced
staff
to.
is. You know how to hold on to your payroll and your food costs, and everything's really you're on top of it. But when you're making a ton of money because it's great economy, good time of the year, blah, 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 money's just flowing in, you kind of don't really think.
You wasted on a lot of things.
Yeah. So we did. I think it was hard. I mean, I'm not saying it was.
No, it wasn't easy, but I think it's important once we talk about how well it's doing, and it is doing very well.
It is.
That it's important that people know that you did it probably at the worst possible time. You started the
Yeah.
worst possible company,
Yep.
a restaurant, which more than half closed within 6 months.
Yep.
At the worst time in the history of our country,
Yeah.
or at least in the last
and I
50 to
couldn't get
70
a
years.
bank to loan me $1 because they said we don't care. You've had 7 other solvent businesses in the last 15 years. We don't care that you can prove all this other income. We don't care that you can prove that you paid every bill you ever said you were going to pay. We don't care about any of this stuff because you're opening a restaurant. If you would open anything but a restaurant, we'll loan you money. And I had never had that experience opening businesses before. I couldn't get to any capital. So that was interesting, really interesting experience.
Now, I have no idea how to start a restaurant. So do you start with obviously location, but I mean, what is the process? Do you find out what your menu's going to be, and then do you have to find a chef and then a location, or I mean, because it seems like there's got to be some steps, and I don't know which ones are the best way to do it.
Well, being that I only had 9 months of experience in a restaurant prior to this, and it was about 20 some years ago when I waitressed at a melting pot.
Ooh, a fondue place.
I loved that place. But
we have
I
one
couldn't.
around the corner from us.
They're awesome. But I really didn't have any other experience in the restaurant industry, and I was pretty much told that I was crazy for doing this, and why would you leave a very successful consulting business to go own a restaurant? I mean, people really, thought I was nuts, and even today they'll come back and tell me, we really couldn't believe that you were going to do that, but good for you, it's working. But
well, you get that after the fact. If it hadn't worked out, you probably wouldn't have heard of. I've seen these people again.
So. Yeah. But
Oh, that
my
poor
version of how I open the restaurant, I don't know how you're really supposed to open a successful restaurant, but this is my version of it. I had a lot of passion for what we were doing and for the menu that we were doing for the gluten-free specifically. And then I started really looking into it and seeing if I could get the capital to do it and what I could do and what space, and really figuring out the financials of what I thought the money was going to be. And then I came across somebody at another restaurant who was a manager there. I was just talking to him. And I told him I was opening, and he gave me some tips. And then I finally said to him, would you be willing to help me and work with me and let me hire you as a consultant? Because I know, when you hire the right consultant, because I was one, or I still am, I guess, you get better information in a shorter period of time and you screw up less. So I hired him, and he was so excited to do the project because I was his first consulting gig. But he was awesome, and he steered me through stuff that I never would have thought to do. But there's a lot of licensing and all that other fun stuff. Hiring the right contractor if you're building, that was a hard thing. We did screw that up, and I did have to come back and hire a second one.
Yeah, but everyone screws up on contractors.
That was a tough one.
Everybody screws up on because it's always. That's the biggest problem. Everyone always runs into some kind of crooked or not even. I don't even. This one may have been crooked, but
he wasn't,
mismanaged.
It was
contractors.
The space I chose was a very difficult space for an outside contractor to come in because it was a very big condo complex. It was built by a very well-known Chicago architect, and it's a very unusual complex to build in because he built a little differently. So the commercial spaces were more of a challenge than this guy thought he was getting into. So he got in over his head, and it just got difficult. But that being said, we found somebody else who was able to help us and do what I needed for the budget that I essentially had. So that was finding the space. But like any business I've ever had or any business I've ever consulted with, the things that I think you always need to have, regardless of what the industry is you always have to have a market of people that need what you have, a market of people who are willing to pay for what you have, and that there's not 58 million other people who are doing exactly what it is that you have.
You got all three of those.
Yeah, and we did. And again, we picked something very interesting that's coming. To me, is not a trend. It's something, I mean, it's a trend. It's not a phase. And the gluten-free thing is just at the bottom of where it's finally being accepted and coming up. So I see, again, in the next couple of years, this trend's going up. So it's not like you buy a bookstore and nobody's reading actual books anymore. They're reading online. You're buying into something that's going up. So we also did that really right. The other thing is I wasn't a chef who was just so excited about my food that I wanted everybody to taste it. I looked at it as a business first that happened to be a restaurant. So I toyed with the idea of being the actual executive chef, and I thought, this is not who I am, and it's not where I want to be. So I, on a Craigslist ad for the whole restaurant, put out an ad, and 4 weeks before I opened, now I already had the menu set up. I knew what all the recipes were because they were mine to start. I met the guy who ended up being my executive chef, and he's fantastic.
He's not a serial killer?
He's not yet, at least.
Well, he maybe, yeah. I hope that's vegan.
I haven't pissed him off enough.
That Chop Susie that he has that he puts out there, you never know.
Exactly. But my executive chef, Dan Santos, he's amazing, and he got what I was doing. Had been in the industry 23 years. We ironically were the same age, graduated from high school the same years. I mean, so there's stuff about us that kind of gelled nicely. But he got what I was doing, and he's an executive chef. That's what he does. So he was able to bring his expertise in and work with me and the consultant when we first started to do his part. So I run the restaurant. I oversee everything. I pay all the bills. I make sure we're solvent. And then he steps in with his expertise and helps me run the kitchen. He hires and fires. I give him all that ability to do that for his kitchen. And I let him treat it as his kitchen. Now, I'll step in, obviously, if there's an issue or a problem, but I let him run that as if he's almost a partner. And we treat each other that way. But the guy gets what I'm doing. And then, ironically, since he's been working there, he's found out his daughter has to be gluten-free, and so is his ex-wife and his parents. So,
well, the ex-wife he doesn't have to worry about, but the
but
we love the kids.
But they're so obviously still involved with the kids'
sure.
lives. But it's interesting because now he's got people in his personal life that have to also eat this way. So that was interesting. He's also an herbalist, which is pretty cool because he's able to bring that in. But it was kind of, I don't want to say divine
intervention. Is he a druid?
What is
He's an herbalist?
He's awesome. That's more popular in the Arizona area, but it's essentially medicine through herbs.
Yeah, I kind of figured. I mean, it's instead of crystal worship, they're doing actual They're going back to when medicine really started out as herbs.
Yep.
So I mean, that's where all medicine has come from.
Exactly.
Now we just
basically we're able to
chemical
use
components.
that knowledge in some of the food. So we have different herbs and things, and we have special tea that was designed by him and a teologist who's also an herbalist. So we have all these medicinal.
Is that really a teologist?
She really is. Yeah, I know.
A teologist?
She's a teologist. Yeah.
It's a science. You get a degree in theology.
I don't know if you can get a degree in it, but
can you go to Vassar and get a degree in theology?
Her stuff is good. That's all.
I'm sure. I have no doubts.
But it's medicinal.
One thing that hippies can do well is tea. They do great tea.
They're modern hippies.
Oh, that's all right.
But we do some cool stuff like that. So all our dressings are freshly made. All of our food.
Well, tell me about some of the food because I've eaten at gluten-free places because I live in Houston and a good friend of both of ours, Chris O'Shea. Mm-hmm. Who's wonderful.
I just had a conversation with her before I left. She's also gluten-free.
Yeah, she's a gluten person. And so when she comes to visit, because she's from there, and we've taken them to dinner a couple times, it's hard to find in a major city, even Houston.
Yeah.
We know a couple of good places that we can go, and there's more every day. But I've eaten gluten-free food, and there's two types. There's really good, there's food that is just everything is gluten-free. And then there is the attempt to recreate like cookies and cakes. And I'll be honest with you, they're awful.
Yeah.
Because I love the stuff that they create that's gluten-free, that it's natural, like they're making something from scratch. Mm-hmm. Those are unbelievable. I mean, I would eat anything that they put but when they try to recreate flour and wheat, what's going on there?
Well, there's a couple things.
You said you had burgers, and hopefully they've got some buns in those burgers.
We do. Well, there's a couple things going on. One, there are people who we're very emotionally attached to food. So much of our lives, I mean, at least 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day, depending on how you eat, you are looking at eating something or trying to eat something or sitting down to a meal. And so many of our religious customs and our backgrounds and our lives wrapped around food. I mean, think of all the celebrations. They always have food. It's
Birthday
always
cakes
food.
and
So there's a huge emotional attachment to how we choose to eat. So what ends up happening is if you find out you can't have something anymore that was especially a major part of your life, bread, for example, and you're Italian, or pasta and you're Italian. Jewish culture is very wrapped into their food, and I tell you can't have matzo balls. I mean, there's huge amounts of stuff that we're emotionally attached to. You're told you have to take it out of your diet, you freak. And it's an emotional, you're losing, it's like something's dying. It's horrible. So you try to recreate that emotional experience, and you try to just get that thing back just without the stuff you can't have. So you want to have the bread without the gluten. You want to have the bread without the eggs. You want to have it. And unfortunately, what ends up happening, we put stuff in there to mask, to become the thing that we can't have, and it's not the same experience.
it's like buying a Bolex watch.
Yes.
It's
not quite. It looks the same sometimes. But
it definitely looks the same, and then you bite into it, and there's nothing but waves and waves of
dry
disappointment.
Yes.
No, you're dry. I was
Yes,
like, no, just
and
disappointment. You can taste the disappointment
Right.
in them.
Now, I have my personal belief about this is that you need to eliminate the thing from your diet completely and not try to necessarily trick yourself into eating something else instead, because again, your body's trying to tell you something. How about you just take it out of your system and learn to eat other foods the way they were intended. So I'm a big fan of the way nature wanted us to actually truly eat is how we should. That being said, there are some way better products out there if you really can't let go of the bread and the emotional attachment's still there, and you need to have it. One of the companies that we really support and we really love is called Udi's, UDI. They're out of Denver. They make amazing stuff. Now, the challenge for me is that they use eggs and corn in their recipes, so I can't eat what they have anymore. But they're an amazing product, and you're really not going to miss anything with those. They're fantastic. We also found other vendors. One in particular is one of our bakeries that we use called Julia's. She was a really successful bakery and then found out she herself was a celiac. And she's like, what kind of cosmic joke is this? But what was awesome for those of us who are, she turned her business around, went all in gluten-free, and she makes some of the greatest products we have. We've got red velvet cupcakes, and she makes these unbelievable cinnamon rolls that you wouldn't even know were gluten-free. They're just awesome. But to me, with anything that we serve in the restaurant, if it doesn't already taste good, it doesn't matter to me if it's gluten-free or not. We won't serve it. So I want the food to taste good and happen to be gluten-free. But there's other things you can do, and things that, okay, let's try this again.
Hold on a second. Let me get the relationship flow chart out for you.
I don't know
Here
what
you
we're
go.
talking about. My executive chef and my boyfriend have both worked with me on creating these. We call them the muffins. But we created this mixture of different flours, but they're coming from different things that you wouldn't normally think, like split peas. We've made flour out of them. We grind them ourselves. But buckwheat, which is not, the word wheat is in it, but it's actually grain-free. So that and potato flour and mesquite flour, tapioca flour, we've mixed a lot of these flours together to create a very specific flour mix. So you're not getting any overwhelming flavors of pea or mesquite.
Yeah, I
And we
hate
use
flavors
that.
of pea when I eat anything.
But
Really.
what's cool about the pea flour is it's got proteins in it, and a lot of times it's difficult getting the proteins in the flours the way you used to. And then we also add chia seed, like the chia pets. Remember that when we were kids?
Chia.
That's the one.
Oh, yeah.
It's ridiculously good for you.
It's tasty, so you can just like gnaw on a chia pet when it grows?
No, you take the seeds and you either put them in water and let them gel up, which happens in about 20 minutes, or you grind them up and mix them into the flours, or you use flaxseed. A lot of people are familiar with flaxseed.
Yeah, that's Barry Bonds used that.
There you go. Well, there you go. So you take all those and then we mix them up with different things, peanut butter. We've done cherries and lemon and ginger, and we've made all these different protein muffins out of them. And I take them when I travel. So I actually have a whole bunch.
Yeah,
of
I know
here.
you did a program, and I saw everything. You bring like blenders with you, and
Sometimes I do blenders. I'll have a little grill. I mean, I bring all sorts of, depending on how long I'm going to be gone. But since we found and started creating these flour mixed muffins, they're awesome. And to me, they're actually, what it is we figured out how to make it so there was enough fats, proteins, carbohydrates, all the things that you need throughout the day, that if I couldn't eat and couldn't find anything, that would be a meal.
it's like a power bar.
It's
a power muffin.
And it tastes awesome. I mean, they're so exciting. So that's one of the things that we've found out how we can kind of recreate but make it still taste good, because again, if it tastes like crap, there's no reason to eat it, regardless of what's in it.
Now, this Saturday, August 13th, you are having a gluten Con? What do you call it?
The GFX Con.
Okay.
The Gluten-Free Expo and Conference. It's in Scottsdale. It's in the same complex that my restaurant is in.
Is it like Comic-Con where the people are going to dress up like allergies or
They're going to dress up like celiac disease.
yeah.
Not quite, but again, because I'm back on the don't be just gluten-free, be gluten-free and healthy in the way that it's best for you. We have naturopath physicians who will be speaking. We have an entire conference set up. We have cooking demos for gluten-free, vegan, raw cooking, if you can cook raw. We have
I can cook raw. That's the only way I cook.
A whole bunch of different experts in that environment, all the way through to some of the fitness people who will be talking about being as healthy as possible. I have a whole entire beauty lineup of people, because if you're gluten-free, you want your hair care products, your skin care products actually not.
Oh, really? I didn't. Well,
Yeah.
being a guy, I never really thought of that, because
Right.
hair care products are slowly going to be out of my need in the next 10 years. But I don't even think about skin products.
Yeah, because you'll absorb it through the pores in your skin. And if you already
Oh.
have skin issues and you're allergic to gluten and you're putting it directly on your skin, you're going to probably have
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I didn't realize you were shellacking your face to
Yeah.
make sure that nothing got through the
Right.
like the Teflon. But you're actually I was talking about the actual ingredients in the makeup. Sometimes has got gluten in it.
Gluten and corn and some of the stuff
The
that we're all
cornstarch,
having.
yeah, they use that in everything.
It's terrible. But even the skin cream and all that kind of stuff, I've seen that stuff that you use, any bacterial soap that you use without water, the waterless stuff almost always has wheat in it, as I've seen. So they're issues. You got to think of it's absorbing into your skin. So we've got beauty care, hair care products, people going to be there doing a whole bunch of fun stuff in the beauty lounge. But we have all the naturopath physicians. The naturopaths will be doing 10-minute consults with people, so you can, your entry gets you.
So the entry automatically, you sign up and you just pick maybe whatever open time slot.
Yep. And then we're doing the TED conference concept, where we have the speakers every 15 minutes are rotating to another topic and another speaker. So it's going to be jam-packed information as fast as possible to get through the whole day, the most number of people with the most amount of information, as concise and as tight as possible. And then we have a couple of food vendors who are going to be showing their different foods. And then afterwards, there is, one of two things. You're either going to go to just the appetizer party, or you can get into the VIP party, which is a full hour of cocktails and then a 5-course
For a little extra
dinner.
dough, huh?
Yeah, the VIP level. Yeah. But you also get a lot of other fun stuff and preferential treatment and getting in to see the docs and special treatments.
Now you started in Scottsdale. This is going to be where in Scottsdale?
It's in Scottsdale. It's at the well, actually, it's right where Nourish is, which is
gonna
in
be at the restaurant?
Optima. Yeah, well, the Optima Camel View complex is what we're in. In that complex, there is a giant room that is, they call it the party room, but it's this huge room where we're using
The champagne room?
Yeah, not quite. But there's an expo. There's enough space for us to have the full expo in there, and then all of the programs going on in there as well. So that's just a floor down from where the restaurant is, and everybody comes back up to the restaurant afterwards for their VIP dinner or for the appetizer hour.
Now, it's in Scottsdale to start with, because that's where you're located. That's where the restaurant is. But I know that you're thinking.
Yeah.
You're always thinking bigger. You're the only person. You got 7 companies. You're always thinking of new things. So, what is your long-term goal with the conference?
Yeah. Well, Nourish is actually the 8th company, and then the conference is actually technically its own separate entity, which is company number 9. What the goal is to move forward and move this into different cities throughout the next 18 to 24 months. When I first started talking about doing this conference, Whole Foods heard through the grapevine that I was doing this, and they called me, and they said that they wanted to sponsor. So I knew I was onto something.
So you didn't have to find sponsors. Sponsors are begging to be a part of it.
Yeah, they're paying to be part of it.
Well, that's what a sponsor does.
I mean, no, but I'm saying they come to me and not just want to be involved. They really want to, they want to pay and they want to be involved, and they want to really kind of broaden this, because they understand the huge piece that this is becoming to them, as well as all their customers and all the people that they want to be in front of. So we have them, we have Whole Foods, and we have Sprouts, which is another major grocery chain out in Arizona and California and Texas. And then we have Udi's, which is, I was talking about them earlier, as a major sponsor. And then we have a bunch of the naturopath physicians and the people that we really trust, that we have relationships with, coming through with all these other things. So we have 25 sponsors at this point. We've closed out the expo as far as vendors, because we just run out of space. And we really wanted to keep this to be as healthy as possible, and have the most amount of information for the right amount of people for the space. So we're actually closing out pretty quickly on the VIP level. We're almost sold out there. And then the second level, conference level, is pretty close to selling out too. And then the basic expo level is still open. So
there's still time to to register. So where
Absolutely.
can they go to register for the conference?
They can go to my website, which is Nourish 123. So it's NOURISH123.com. And on that website, they'll see in the upper left-hand corner for the GFX Con. And they can click on there and they can register right online and get their tickets, and they'll be on the guest list.
But they can also go there for the restaurant information.
Yes.
And it sounds like there's nothing I can do to stop you from being successful. It's really irritating, quite frankly.
That's awesome.
Everything you do, it turns into gold.
We're hoping.
This one is so close to your heart. You must be really satisfied that you see it taking off so well.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, this is going to sound kind of sappy, but there's a piece of this that I really wish there had been things available for me when I first found out, because I was just totally freaked out. And I felt like, I had my supermarket meltdown, which every person that has a major food allergy at some point is traveling through the supermarket with their cart and going to those things that they normally buy, and they're reading the labels and realizing they can't have this, they can't have that, I can't have this. Oh my God, what am I going to eat? And then you just freak out and you have your meltdown in the supermarket where you're sitting there with an empty cart and you're going, what am I'm going to starve to death. Like, you just start to freak out, or the things that you loved the most are no longer allowed. So it's like going through like a death. It's terrible to watch the things you can't have anymore. But when you wrap your head around the things that you can have and you start to learn your way around it, and there's so many other people like this, and you start seeing vendors and products start to kind of change to satisfy this need, you come back out of it. But it's the worst. Or customers will come to the restaurant, their doctors have told them, this is your issue, you have celiac disease or you're gluten intolerant or whatever, and they end up sending them to us first, and they'll come in all upset, and they'll just sit down and be like, I don't know what to eat. And my staff is amazing with them. When I'm there and the executive chef there, we get to talk to them. But it's cool because you see there's hope, and it's not the end of the world, and it's just food, and you'll figure it will help you figure it out. And there's some people, the only place they ever eat out is our restaurant.
And more importantly, it tastes good.
And that's the thing. You don't have to lose flavor, and you don't have to use the fun for food.
So yeah, as a non-allergic, I'm like and I think I do have a slight situation with gluten.
Oh, I would bet money that 85% of the people,
especially when you throw the Italian thing in.
Well, it's a background issue, but I would bet you 85% of the people walking around right now are having an actual reaction to gluten. They're just not necessarily seeing the difference. I have people all the time, I don't have a problem, I'd love to eat, I don't have any issues. And I'm like, yeah, but you just complained about a headache earlier today, and you say you're bloated today, or you do. Well,
despite all the bloating talk and all the food that we end up seeing, despite the fact we haven't digested it, this whole conversation has made me very hungry.
Oh, good.
And I know you do a great job of making, because I tasted some of the samples you've made. So if you have a chance, if you're in Scottsdale, what's the address of the restaurant?
The physical address is 7147 East Highland, HIGHLAND Avenue, Scottsdale 85251. Because my mailing address actually takes you.
No, I want people to be able to go there.
Yeah, that you can put into your GPS and it'll take you.
And
there.
the next time I'm in Phoenix, I hope I get the VIP treatment.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I want to thank Kirstin Carey for coming on the show. Remember, her restaurant, Nourish, can be located on the web at nourish123.com. If you're ever in the Scottsdale area, go there. I guarantee you will not be disappointed. It's a great place. Also, if you want, you can always email me, Craig at speakercraigprice.com, with any questions, concerns, any guest suggestions. You can go to the podcast, realitycheckpodcast.com, to sign up for the RSS feed or subscribe to us on iTunes. Have a great week.